So we're on Daf Tzadi Ches, which we started yesterday. And we're up to Kishahu Oved Kochav, which was approximately 15, a little bit more than 15 lines down from the top of the Amud. Kishu Oved Kochav. So the Chachamim were matir in the case of, what was his name again? Niftius? Did I get that right? Yeah. Oh, maybe you read it. Nifotius. Nifotium. I don't know. Anyway, he was a ger, and they allowed him to marry his maternal brother's wife after the death of his maternal brother, Achiv Me'ima. So the Gemara wants to suggest that it's a case where his brother married a woman while he was a god, before he underwent gerus. So the Gemara asks Maila Meimar, well, why do I need this din at all? I mean, there's no chiddush whatsoever. It's pshita. Certainly, they would have been matir niftium to marry a ger, to marry his brother's wife, which his brother married when she was not Jewish. A man that marries a woman when she's Jewish, okay, then you can talk about his brother. If he was a ger and his brother was a ger, and they shared the same mother, you can talk about his either permission or the illegality of marrying his wife. But if he was married to her as a goyeta, Ma'ila Meimar, what's the chiddush? Ma'ila the Gemara answers, I would have thought, if not for the Brisa Ligzar, we should make a gzera, and we should prohibit this ger for marrying Eishes Achiv Me'imo Shenis Kadsha Kshehi Akum Otu Kshu Ger. Because if we allowed that case, where his brother married her when she was a goyeta, an Ovedes Kochavim, then somebody might come to be matir even Eishes Achiv Me'imo when his brother married her after she was misguided. Machmalan, that's what the Bryce wants to tell me, that the Chachamim did not go that far. They wouldn't generate an Isser on a ger to marry Eishes Achiv, Shenasa Achiv Kshehu Goy. And I would have applied the principle here of Gzera L'Gzera. I don't know if anybody mentions that. Let's see this footnote here, number Yud Gimel. I don't know if you have a footnote in your Gemara. He says, "Af shalom atzidu shechachamim gozru baseh im kein elon utam lesser madu oisa b'rais tzrichlas menishimut mikol makom yesh dvarim shemuzar kol chacham lesser v'ligdor geder b'makom shamichshal motz." Okay, I don't know if this is a great discovery. Toshma. So we're going back to the issue of whether or not you're allowed to marry Eishes Achiv Me'imo. Toshma. The Omar ben Yasyon, okay, that was his name. We'll call him Ben for short. So I went to the seaport cities. Matzasi, I met there a ger echad, a ger shenasa Eishes Achiv Me'imo. Amarti lo B'ni mi hirshacha. Did you ask a rabbi? Did you get some sort of a permission to marry her? She is the wife of your late brother from a common mother. Omar Lee, the ger by the name of Ben, responded, Hare Isha v'shiva banel. What about the story of Rabbi Akiva when a Giores, who is the mother of 7 sons, and Rabbi Akiva allowed Ish es Eshes Achiv, each one to marry the wife of his brother. So I decided that I would come to conclusions on my own. And by analogy, I would equate and compare my case to the case of the 7 sons of that Giores and the Psak of Rabbi Akiva L'Kula. And not only that, Al Safsal Ze Yoshev Rabbi Akiva. Now, it's that Maisa where Rabbi Akiva was matir Eshes Ach in Geruv. It was Al Safsal Ze. On this bench, this is where Rabbi Akiva was sitting when he issued his psak. The Omar Shnei Dvar. And right here, I can testify that he said 2 things. Number 1, Ger no se Eshes Achiv me'imo. And the Omar, and in addition, he said in the name of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva said, that in the Pasuk in Yonah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends Yonah to warn the people of Nineveh that in 40 days he's going to destroy Nineveh, and Yonah runs away by boat to Chutz La'aretz, and ultimately they throw him into the sea, and he was swallowed up by a great fish, and then he was regurgitated by that fish. And it says, Vayehi Dvar Hashem el Yonah shenis lemor. And again, a second time, now after Yonah was running away, he was a fugitive, he got spit up on dry land by the Yonah, by the Dag. And now HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes again to warn Yonah to go to the Anshe Nineveh and transmit this warning and this prophecy that they'll be destroyed in 40 days. So Rabbi Akiva says that from this pasuk, Shenis Dibra Imo Shechina, Shlishis Lo Dibra Imo Shechina. The Torah goes out of its way to say Shenis, to tell you that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to speak to Yonah a 3rd time. Yonah loses his status as a Navi. Funny But let's go back to the first statement of Rabbi Akiva, Ger Nose Eshes Achiv me'imo. Now again, what was the case? Did his brother marry this woman when she was a non-Jewish or after her gerus? It's not completely clear. But let's assume it was even after her gerus. That means his brother married a woman who's Jewish, and now the other brother wants to marry this woman after his brother dies, and they're both brothers from the same mother. And yet Rabbi Akiva was matir Eshes Achiv me'imo in the case of a ger. By law, shouldn't we assume that Rabbi Akiva, when he's matir the ger to marry his brother's wife, the nosva achiv kishu ger? Rabbi Akiva went as far as being matir Eshes Achiv me'imo in a ger situation, even though his brother married her after the gerus, when she was a full-fledged Jewess. So this fellow Yasyan, L'chora, has an explicit brisa to support his marriage, to permit him to marry Eshes Achiv me'imo, even though his brother married her when her gerus. The Gemara says, "Lo, that's not the pshat in the brisa, but rather the nosva kishuhu ovei kochavim." The Rabbi Akiva ruled that he could marry his brother's wife because his brother married her before she became a Gioris, while she was an Ovedes Kochavim. That's the only case in which Rabbi Akiva was matir a ger to marry his brother's wife. Again, his maternal brother's wife. But don't prove anything, Mr. Ben, from Rabbi Akiva about a case where you want to marry your brother's wife who was married off to your brother after the Gerus. So the Gemara now says, Maila Meimra, why do we need this din at all? There's no chiddush whatsoever. Rabbi Akiva is quoted here in the transmission of the Brisa as if he was machadish something new, that you're allowed to marry the sister, the wife of your brother when your brother married a goyata. I mean, Maila Meimra, what's the chiddush? And again, the same answer that we saw before. Mao de Tame, I would have thought, Nigzar, Ishu Ove Kochavim, Atuk Shuger. We don't want to be matir or get into a situation where people will think it's mutter to marry the wife of your brother when your brother married her after Eretz. And if we're going to allow it in the case where your brother married this girl before the Gerus, when she was still in Ovedes Kochavim, people will mistakenly jump the gun and apply that same heter, that same license in a case where your brother married her after the Gerus. And therefore, there's a big chiddush here in this brisa, quoting Rabbi Akiva, whose ruling did not accept this zera, and rather Chachamim allowed him to marry Eishes Achiv if she was married off to his brother while she was still an Ovedes Kochavim. Now, I hope I'm not misleading anybody, that the same laws and rules would apply if he married her before his Gerus. We've been explaining it that the kula here was if he married the other brother, the late brother, married his wife before her Gerus. It could be before his Gerus. The same laws would apply. She's not married to him, according to Jewish law, if he wasn't misguided. Okay. Now, they trusted this Ben Yasyam in his quote of Rabbi Akiva. Notes he was relied on in the transmission of Rabbi Akiva. Umiva Haman is a person believed to testify in a way that he himself will gain from that testimony. Imagine, he's telling you that Rabbi Akiva allowed this marriage, which is exactly the marriage that he's in. The Omar Rabbi Abba Rav Huna Marav Kol Talmid Chacham Shemora Halacha Uba Im Kodei Ma'isa Amora Shomim Lo V'Im Lav Ein Shomim. So we're talking about a case of a Talmid Chacham who quotes his Rebbe lehalacha, and we never heard this from any other source. Can we rely on the Talmud quoting his Rebbe? And it all depends about Kodeh Ma'isa Amora or Lo Kodeh Ma'isa Amora. Now, I'm not sure exactly what's going on, because we just finished saying that we have no independent source as quoting this transmission in the name of the Rav, other than this Chacham, this Talmud, but now it's saying that Koda Maisa Amara, that he already said it long and long ago. I think, again, this is just a shot in the dark here, that what a Rebbe says to his Talmidim is not necessarily what ultimately will be his final opinion, ruling it for halacha l'maaseh. But yet, the fact that he in the past has said this to his Talmidim in the course of teaching them, it's not a shock when at some point he is being quoted by a Talmud as paskening that way la'alach l'maaseh, even though he never said it la'alach l'maaseh. So that's called Kodem Maisa Amora. Even before the actual practical scenario came up for a ruling, he had been teaching this halacha, disseminating it amongst his Talmud. Now, a Talmud Chacham who quotes a case in which the Rebbe actually pasking like that is believed. But if it's a case where we never heard this halacha, even in a theoretical context, in the lab, in the classroom, we never heard him say this. And now we're going to rely totally on the testimony of a Talmud, ain't showing them. We're not going to listen and rely on the Talmud who is transmitting a hurrah of his Rebbe. So in other words, when this actual Maisa came up, we don't rely on the credibility of a Talmud to tell us what is Rebbe Paskin in the exact same scenario. We think maybe he's fabricated because he has vested interest. Because we never heard this halacha, none of his Talmidim ever heard this psak, even in a theoretical context. So how is it, therefore, that the Gemara relies on Ben Yasyu, that Rabbi Akiva was matir of man marrying his maternal brother's wife when they are both buried? We never heard this in the name of Rabbi Akiva, so how can we rely on Ben? And the Gemara answers, I'll give you one answer, Mora Ubahoy. I didn't realize that this Ben Yasmin was such a Talmud Chacham. Oh, I see. I made a mistake here. Sorry. This Ben Yasyan was transmitting a story that he heard from a ger. Did I get that right? Let's see if I got that right. Matsasi ger echad shenasa ishis ochim mi'im. Amarti lo b'nim yesh amali harei isha v'shiva banela al salpsel ze yosher Rabbi. So it's not that we're relying on Ben Yasmin, we're relying on the ger who's telling this story to Ben Yasmin. So what does it mean, Mora Ubahaya? So again, I'm just taking a shot at this. You'll tell me what you have in your translation or footnotes. I think what we're saying here is that Ben Yasmin himself was a Torah scholar, And apparently, he himself was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. I don't know if I have to go that far, but in any event, in the course of discussions about this sugya, this issue of marrying your brother's wife, in the past, this Ben Yaisyan, can't get his name straight, he had already disseminated this psak halacha in the name of his Rebbe. Now, I'm not happy with that because now he's saying it in the name of this ger. Can I borrow your Gemara for a minute? Mm-hmm. I just want to see if maybe he clarifies it. Ibai is saying, Mora Ubahaya. He had indeed taught this halachic tradition in the past, i.e., it was known that the proselyte had recounted this ruling of Rabbi Akiva. Oh, he's not learning it the way I do. Before it became relevant to his own situation. Second. He says, "V'imlav ein shomlov ein mekabel neshora also shahora b'shem Rabba." David shumachadesh din shadayin lo shemanu choshesh shema hachacham meshake. Imkain eich efshel kabel. Listen to this. Imkain eich efshel kabel as divrei ben Yaisman. And on that, the Gemara answers, Mora Ubahai. That's not what it says here. Here he says that second, where was it? He says that how do we rely on the testimony of the proselyte? And the answer is because it was known that the proselyte had recounted this ruling of Rabbi Akiva even before it became relevant to his own situation. We're learning here in the Masifta, Heich Efshel Kabel is Divrei Ben Yaisman, not as Divrei Ager. Probably not the first time or the last one that I'll find a discrepancy between these two commentaries. The Ibai Seima, now the Gemara offers a second answer, Mishum Deka Omar, he says, Omar ben Yaisin, Harei Isha v'Shiva Banel. Now again, I'm sorry I gave back to the Gemara to you, but can you tell me what he says, Mishum Deka Omar? How does he translate Deka Omar? Shouldn't have given it back to you. Mistake. looking around from one page to the other. Ibois Ema Mishum de Ka'amar.
Did the first say because he's
Oh, he said he doesn't tell you who the he is. Oh, that's it. That's a cheap. I think the word he is referring to the proselyte. And the Masifta says that Mishum de Ka'amar ben Yaisyon. Or Isha v'shiva b'neklam shu Omar b'tvarav shekach kvar naga haloch l'maisa b'kodem l'chenu neman ba'oros. Yeah, he's talking about Ben Yais, not about the proselyte. Iboy say Meshani Hochi, because Omar, because Ben Yaisan said Maisa Achrina Ba'da. Right, Rabbi Akiva gave a whole drasha here about Yonah as a prophet, etc. So for the fact that he was quoting both of these halachas in the name of Rabbi Akiva, he couldn't have come up with it on his own. So he's believed for the drasha of Rabbi Akiva, and therefore he's believed in the same breath about the halacha of allowing, according to Rabbi Akiva, to marry your brother's wife in the case of Ger. Omar Mar, now the Gemara goes off on an agadita. Vayehi dvar Hashem el Yonah shenis lemar, shenis dibrei moshchina, shlishis lo dibrei moshchina. So the Gemara asks about Ksiv. We'll see that God actually appears and communicates with Yonah another time. And that's in a pasuk about Yeravam ben Yoash, who Heshiv as Ul Yisrael, Milavo Hamas, Ad Yom HaRava, Idvar Hashem Asher Diber B'Yad Avto Yonah ben Amitai Hanavi. So I don't know, how does the Gemara know that this pasuk is referring to a later period of time? He writes here, Yeravam ben Yoash hayami Malchei Yisrael, Molach Arboi v'Achat Shana, Gam Yeravam hayamelech, She'osa Sarah Beini Hashem v'Losar Mikol Chatos Yeravam ben Nevat, As Malchuso Etzliach Lichbosh Es Eretz Yisrael Gvuloseh Miyad Aram, V'Nechlechu Chachamim in Yerushalmi and Chala im Yeravam Chavash Yosef Mikol Hamalachim Asher Lefanavo Shebak Chaz Mikovish is Kol Mashi Kovsh Lefanavo Yovad Mehem Atam Shezol Kach Yeravam Shayirosh Lefisha Lo Kibel Lashon Hara Al Amos Hanavi. All right, that's all very interesting, but what's it got to do with us? I'm just going to have to borrow your Gemara. I apologize. I usually keep this at home, but I brought it here only because I know you need it. Okay. It is written elsewhere, he restored the boundary of Israel from the approach of Hamas until the Sea of Arava, like the word of Hashem, God of Israel, which he had spoken by the hand of his servant Jonah of Amittai, son of Amittai the prophet. Thus we see that Hashem did speak to Jonah a third time. This verse refers to Yerovam, the son of Yoash, who restored to Israel cities that had been taken away by the kings of Aram. If you prefer, say that he was believed because he said, behold, a woman and her 7 sons. Hence, his account was corroborated by the existence of that woman and her sons. Yeah, this is all about the proselyte, according to him. Since we believe about one teaching, we believe about the other. Omar Avinal Iske Ninve Ka'ama. What Rabbi Akiva said is that he did not speak any further to Jonah about the affairs in Nineveh. He did speak to him about other matters. That is, although we find elsewhere that the people of Nineveh reverted to their sinful ways and prophecies were pronounced against them, as described in the book of Nahum, these prophecies were not delivered by Yonah, that's Paliatophis. And Rav Nachman Yitzchak Omar, Hochi Omar. The pasuk in Yerovam means Kidvar Hashem Asher Diber Biad Avdo An Novi, like the word of Hashem which he had spoken by the hand of his servant the prophet. Not that Yonah had ever prophesied about Yerovam, but Kishem Shenemach LeNinveh Mira LeTova, Kach B'Yimei Yerovam Ben Yoash Nefach Lem LeYisrael Mira LeTova. Just as God's decree was changed for Nineveh from bad to good, so too in the days of Yerovam, the son of Yoash, God's decree changed for Israel from bad to good. Okay, so we got up to Tashma. Let's make a note of where we got up to. We'll know where to start tomorrow. Tashma. It's on Sariches of an Aleph. Again, I want to repeat that this year will take place on Wednesday, 2 days down the line later on, meaning at around 11:15 or something, maybe 11:30. Start a little later. So again, just to note where we're up to, Tashma, where's Tashma? It is 3 lines before the end of the Amud. Did I get that right? Ger Shahoiso Daso B'Kedusha V'Ra'aso Shelo. No. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. And then let me take this opportunity to wish everyone a great day. Thank you so much.